Bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue. This is We in France, where we talk about everyday French life and beyond. Now, I've lived in France since 2012, and life here is not perfect. And that's because life anywhere isn't perfect. But there are some genuine upsides that have made my life a lot less stressful over the years. Now, if you've been watching for a while, you know I don't sugarcoat things around here or paint France as some kind of utopia, but let me give credit where it's due. I want to get into 5 things that I stopped worrying about after moving to France, and honestly, it's been a breath of fresh air. So let's get into it. All right, number one, food quality and unhealthy additives that are commonplace in the United States. Now, in the US, ultra-processed foods are everywhere, even in seemingly simple items or things that you think are healthy, like healthy cereals, bread, yogurt. All of those things can contain a long list of preservatives and artificial colors, flavorings, and just additives, which are banned in many other countries, including here in France. Now, in the US, just to give you some examples, we use things like RBGH or RBST, a genetically modified growth hormone in dairy, something called brominated vegetable oil or BVO in sodas, and certain artificial dyes that have been linked to health concerns. Now, to contrast that with France and actually the EU as a whole, there are much stricter regulations about what can be used and what can't be used in food products. So to just give you an example, that BVO I just mentioned in sodas, that was banned in all of the EU back in 2008. But going beyond just avoiding harmful additives, food in France is generally fresher, and I love that. Supermarkets tend to have shorter shelf lives on dairy and baked goods just because they don't rely on that same level of chemical preservatives as we do in the US. And there are farmers markets nationwide, even here in small towns where I live, pretty much everywhere, and that's just ingrained in the culture. There's a lot of fresh produce at farmers markets that's locally grown. There's seasonal produce that actually tastes like what it's supposed to taste like. And of course, there's a lot of processed foods here in France too. I don't want to make it seem like everything is fresh and healthy. That's not the case. And you might not be aware, but the French are huge consumers of McDonald's. So not everything here is automatically healthy. You know, you're going to find industrial processed junk food. You're going to find fast food, like I just said. And just to tell you, like where I live, in a 5-minute radius from my house, I could go to KFC, McDonald's, Burger King, Domino's Pizza, and a bunch of local fast food chains. So yes, all of that exists in France too. But overall, I feel like I don't have to scrutinize, every label or worry that my everyday groceries are packed with questionable chemicals. The regulations here prioritize that food quality and safety in a way that just makes me feel more at ease with what I'm eating. And honestly, food just tastes better in France, and I love that. Now, I also just want to point out that all food is not terrible in the US. I'm not saying that. Many grocery stores in the US have beautiful produce that's also heavily regional. You can absolutely get quality food in the US, but there's a level of privilege that, one, you have the education to know the difference between good quality food and what's not good quality. That, two, you have the ability to seek it out. So if you're in a food desert, that you have access to a car. And that, three, you can afford to go to these higher end grocery stores and find the higher quality food. And, a lot of people just don't know better. They don't expect harmful additives to be in their food, and you don't know what you don't know. The difference is that in France, it's what I started this point with, the overall food quality is better because those same additives, they don't exist in France. So it's not even an option to get soda with BVO. Two, that expectation to be constantly positive and friendly. I don't worry about that anymore. And if you're an American like I am, you know exactly what I mean. There's this cultural expectation that you have to be cheerful and happy all the time, smiling at strangers, making small talk, asking, oh, how are you? Even when you just don't have the headspace to listen to the answer. No one likes a complainer in the US, but in France, things are a little different. In fact, complaining in France is a bit of a national sport. You'll see that French people tend to complain maybe a bit more than you're used to. And I used to think French people were cold when I first arrived. I thought maybe they were a little rude, but that's not the case. They're just more reserved, and there's no fake enthusiasm, no forced pleasantries. Now, yeah, friendships here, in my opinion, they take a little longer to build, but when they do, they feel genuine. Now, conversations, in my experience, they tend to be more real. They're not just social scripts we follow out of habit. And honestly, it is refreshing. I no longer feel that pressure to always be on, and being all happy. And if I'm having a bad day, I don't need to pretend that I'm great just to keep up appearances. It's okay to just be. Now, that said, yeah, sure, in France, you might find some overly enthusiastic, smiley French people. They exist. Not everyone fits into the same box. Not everyone's a big complainer. But there are definitely cultural differences that you'll notice. There are things at play, and you won't be told to smile just because. And I say amen to that. Thumbs up. And for the record, I think I'm a perfectly friendly person at this stage in my life who tries to be pretty positive overall. And I really do try to see the bright side of things. And I'm truly grateful, even for the hard times over the past few years. But I despise toxic positivity and putting on an air of fake happiness just to be palatable to others and appear pleasant. And that is not a problem in France. Now, speaking about worrying, tell me this. How often do you think about online security? Well, if you're like me, probably not enough until something bad happens. And that's why I use NordVPN, the sponsor of today's video. And honestly, I wouldn't browse the internet without it. With just one click, NordVPN keeps me safe online, whether I'm at a cafe, using public Wi-Fi, or at the airport, or even just browsing at home. And plus, with their Threat Protection Pro, I don't have to worry about malware, fake websites, or pop-up ads. NordVPN's mission is to make the internet better than it is today, meaning it should be free of online threats, censorship, and surveillance. And you can check them out via my link below, nordvpn.com/weinfrance. My favorite part is you won't get any more of those messages like this content isn't available in your country. And you won't have to worry about malware and hackers. Your data's going to stay private, and your online activity will not be tracked. You can go online without worrying about those annoying scammers or that creepy feeling of being constantly watched. Think of NordVPN as a fence for your internet that keeps you safe by encrypting your internet traffic and protecting your online identity. All you have to do is download NordVPN, which looks like this on desktop, and browse safely and privately with the fastest VPN on the planet. One account will protect up to 10 devices, and NordVPN offers 24/7 customer support. Now, to start browsing safely today, risk-free, get my exclusive NordVPN deal plus 4 months extra on a 2-year plan with my link, nordvpn.com/weinfrance. It is absolutely risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Now let's get back to the video. All right, number 3, something else I don't worry about is healthcare bankrupting me. So let's talk about healthcare. In the US, it was a constant source of anxiety for me, and maybe for a lot of you out there currently. Even with insurance, it can be panic-inducing to think about all those mystery costs you might encounter when you go to the doctor or the hospital. Things like costs from deductibles, copays, whether something is in your network or out of network, and just surprise bills because you never know how much your insurance is going to cover. Now, a simple doctor's visit, it could really feel like a financial gamble stateside. And sometimes I go to a doctor's visit and ask up front, like, how much is that skin biopsy going to cost? Or the lab work? And the secretary could not give me an actual number. And that was scary. And just to give you a personal example, back in the day at the beginning of my career in New York City, I went to an allergist. I needed some allergy testing. And as it turns out, the allergist sent my test to a lab that he regularly used, but that was not in my network. Now, I had no control over where my lab work was being sent. I didn't even realize it was a question that I needed to ask. I assumed I had good insurance. It would be covered. But unfortunately, I learned right away, to the tune of $1,800, that healthcare costs can catch you by surprise, even with great coverage. So when I saw that bill, my heart dropped. I did negotiate it down, but I was still majorly out of pocket, and it was a shock. Now, to turn to France, the whole system is different. Healthcare, first and foremost, it is a human right. That's how it should be. It's not a privilege or a perk of working for a good employer. That said, it's not free. You and your employer, you pay into the system, but it is affordable and accessible for everyone. Now, a doctor's visit costs about 25 euros for everyone, and serious illnesses and emergencies, they don't cost a fortune, so there's no reason to delay seeking out medical care if you're unwell. And better yet, the prices are clearly displayed, on the wall in the waiting rooms, at the dentist too, by the way, so you know the price ahead of time. And the prices and reimbursements don't depend on your insurance. They're the same for everyone. There is something called une mutuelle, which is supplementary insurance, and that's at an additional cost that'll reimburse you more. But the base reimbursement is the same. Prescriptions, they don't cost a fortune. And if something serious happens, I know I'm not going to be drowning in debt for the rest of my life. Now, of course, the system is not perfect, but there's this underlying sense of security that I never had before, and I love that. All right, next. No over-the-top tipping in France, or rather that it's barely even a thing. You do not tip 15 to 20% at restaurants. Now, back in the US, tipping, it can feel like this kind of constant math quiz, like,
did I leave enough? Was it too much? They're gonna think I stiffed them. Was the tip automatically included? We were a party of 8.
And it can be stressful. And I feel that it kind of sucks that employers don't pay their servers a livable wage and they have to depend on tips for a living. Now, in France, service workers actually earn a living wage and they don't depend on tips. Now, being a server, it's not a super well-paid job like a surgeon or anything like that, but tips don't factor into their compensation. So here, tipping is more of like a rounding up situation if you go to a cafe for a quick coffee, or, you want to leave a couple of euros for great service. And you know what? The servers, they still get the job done, and I no longer have to overthink every single restaurant bill. Now, since moving to France, tipping does seem to be gaining momentum with time. And you'll sometimes see the option on the little credit card payment machines to leave a tip, but it is not required. It is not seen as a faux pas to not leave a tip at the hair salon, the nail salon, or for your server. Culturally, I would say overall, tipping has not caught on here across the board, and that is a good thing. All right, next, number 5, the pressure to be productive at all times. Now, in the US, it can feel like your career is the ultimate measure of your worth. Long hours, trying to get that promotion and climb the career ladder, always being available, all of that. It's a badge of honor for many types of workplaces and industries. And having a personal life can feel like you're slacking off. And don't even get me started on job security and how that ties in, since most jobs in the US are at-will employment, and we don't even have employment contracts. Now, in France, that work-life balance is sacred. It's not just a cliche, the long lunches and the 5 weeks of vacation and holidays. It's a fundamental part of French culture. And this reflects a broader belief that there's more to life than work. And this is one of the biggest mindset shifts that I've experienced since moving to France. Your value as a human being is not measured by how much you work. Being busy isn't a measure of how important you are. Taking time off, it's not seen as laziness or being less committed to your career. And most of all, vacations don't come with guilt. Now, in the US, how many times have you heard someone say, "Oh man, I really need a break, but work is just too crazy right now"? So they keep working. In France, rest is not something you earn. It's something you're entitled to. It's a right. And I kind of trained myself to unlearn the idea that productivity defines my value as a person. And I can't even begin to describe how freeing that is. Work-life balance in France is respected in a way that feels refreshing. And when I first got here, truth be told, I was kind of shocked and annoyed sometimes that stores would close earlier than what I was used to, or on Sundays, even Mondays. But now I love that people prioritize their personal lives over constantly being on. Now, as I always say, living in France, it's not all smooth sailing. There are challenges, there are frustrations, moments where I absolutely have missed the familiarity of the US, and that'll never go away. But stepping away from my old life, it's helped me shed some of these unnecessary worries and adopt a more, I would say, balanced approach to living. And of course, I always look forward to my visits back to the US. I'll always love that because my family and friends are there. Now, if you're thinking about moving abroad, know that it's not a magical escape from all of your problems, but it can open your eyes a bit to different ways of living and hopefully make you a better human in the process. So I would love to hear from you. What are the things that you'd love to stop worrying about in your life? Or maybe you've moved abroad and you can identify or even disagree with some of the things that I've said. I'd love to hear from you down in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you back on We in France soon. Salut!